My name is Holly Hunt with Beck Technology, and today we have Michael Boren. He is our Chief Technology Officer here, and he's going to walk through some of the new features that are coming out in the upcoming release. So with that, Mike, I'll go ahead and let you take it away.
Awesome, Holly. Thank you so much. Well, first off, let me thank everybody for attending today. I really appreciate your time. I also wanted to let you know that there are a ton of new features in this product, and it's physically impossible for me to get to them all in today's webinar. I do think it may run long. I do want to be respectful of your time. If for some reason it runs long and you need to drop off, we are always happy to reconnect with you on a one-on-one basis and walk you through any new functionality or show you how the new product works or even get you set up with a beta copy. All right, before I kick this off, there are about 45 major feature sets in this new version, where each feature set could have 10 to 20 features inside of it, and so there's a lot to show. We did actually send some stuff out ahead of time to try to figure out what it was that you wanted to see. We wanted to look at, was it more important to look at the ease of assembly creation, efficiencies in the estimate creation, functionality with 2D and 3D takeoff, our parametric estimating enhancements. And it was really kind of a smattering across the boards. There really wasn't a clear favorite, but what I will do is try to address as best as I can each one of those sections, knowing that I won't be able to get through it all. And then at the end of this, I will certainly give you all a complete list of all the functionality, at least the major feature sets that are in the new release. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. Most of the development was actually done in our Data Manager product. So Data Manager 2018 2.0 has a ton of stuff in it. I'm going to fly through that at a very high level because there's only a small segment of our user base that really is actively into this, and I want to make sure that you all get something out of this. Super high level, inside of Data Manager 2018 2.0, we've actually moved the ability to manage your databases, upgrade, backup, restore, copy, rename, everything inside of the application, which will make it a lot easier for your database administrators. It'll make it a lot easier for working with your implementation and support teams from Beck Technology if you need to. So this should make your lives a lot easier. One of the major pieces that we added inside of Data Manager 2018 2.0 was a concept we call choices. And it's all built around trying to make working with assemblies a lot easier. So what we've done is we've provided a way to visualize how you walk through choices, how you walk through decision making inside of these assemblies, to make it easier to not only build these, but to communicate them and then edit them later on. So all of these choices are reusable inside of assemblies as well. I thought what I'd do is very quickly walk through what this means for those of you who may not be intimately involved. Previously, if I wanted to add a line item to an assembly, I would put that line item in an assembly, and then I would write what we call an evaluation formula, which could be massive. And that evaluation formula would basically go through and say, hey, when do I include this? And when I do include it, how do I quantify it? And you do that on a line item by line item basis. If you've got hundreds or thousands of line items in an assembly, you can imagine how much of an effort this would take. And then because you have this big flat list of items, trying to explain to somebody who didn't build that how it worked was very difficult. You can see here now, just in this example of anchor bolts, an idea of what we've been able to create. Basically, along the top, you can see the types of questions. In this case, you have 2 questions. Are they required? And then if they are, what template should be used? And then you can see the logic right here for each of the rows, and then the line items that will be applied inside of this choice. And they could be simple, like this one, or they could be very detailed, like this concrete assembly here. And just to give you an idea, you also have the ability to interact with questions, including their ordering. On the note of ordering, one of the things that we've done in Data Manager, and this is across the board, so you can see it here for questions, where I have an order column, as well as if I go back to choices, you can see it here for the items, and it also shows up in WBS properties, assembly items, resources, resource groups. You can now reorder all of the things in any list based off of an order value here, and if I click in here and I type a new value, it'll send this line to wherever I put that value. So controlling the order, which used to be a little bit more tedious because you have to basically move it up and down, is now very quick and very effective. All right. What I'd like to do is I want to create a choice really fast. I want to create a new choice. This is going to be, we'll call it a concrete, simple concrete. And then, so. And then what I want to do for this concrete choice is I want to add some line items, just to give you some concept of what we can do now. So here, let's say I want to add in all the different strengths of concrete that I have, and then maybe even put in this case, we'll do some water reducers. So now I've just added all the line items. I've basically created a concept of a variable that's not actually a variable in the form of this question here. So we're going to say, what's the strength of concrete? So call this, and then we'll actually put a new question in here. So we'll say, and then while we're in here, let's go ahead and let's add a new question, and we'll call this the water reducer required, and then we'll say, is water, and then we'll do another one, and we'll say, okay, if it is, what's the strength? So or we'll call it water dose. That's a good one. All right. So and then we'll say, what is the dose of the water? All right. So now I've got three different questions I've asked. Here I want to say concrete strength. These will basically turn into different choices. Now maybe I don't want to put the word concrete, so I could come in here and edit these and remove some of these. I'm only going to do a couple of them just to show you what it looks like. And then for water reducer, I'm going to say if water reducer is required, they have to answer yes. So I'll type in yes here. All right, so we know that's yes. And then if it is required, here we're going to say for the extended dose, they need to answer extended. And then for the standard dose, they need to answer standard. All right, and then it doesn't really matter here what value they pick. For concrete strength, they only need to answer if it's required. So here I've just created a choice. I've just created all the logic inside that choice. And now if somebody were to walk up and say, hey, how does that simple concrete choice work? I can walk them through it pretty easily by saying, hey, first we ask for the concrete strength, then we see if water reducer is required, and if it is, we try to figure out which one. And here's the items that we apply when we do that. Now for an assembly, let's just create a new assembly. I'm going to call this one slab on grade. So I'm going to call this a simple slab on grade, and this is going to be, we'll call it a demo. All right. And then all I'm going to do here is I'm going to add an assembly item or a choice. And it's going to be my new little, simple concrete choice that's here on the bottom. Now you do have a lot of power outside of just being able to add choices. There's also this concept of questions. This is a new feature as well. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but what I do want to highlight is the fact that you can show in a very simple way the questions that are asked, the order they're asked, and we even have this new concept called Ask When to provide very simple logic to know when you should ask this question. It can be complex, but the basic idea is that we've simplified how that's presented to you, so you don't have to create concepts of conditionals. So it's if and when and then and that. You just literally put the parameter here, and it will figure it out for you. And one other thing that we've also done is enabled you to have WBS-specific properties, values for assembly items inside of an assembly. So in this case, I can say that if I've got a certain type of concrete referenced in here, depending on how I'm using that concrete, I want to have different uniformat values, let's say. So you can do that. You also have the ability, and I'm not going to show it here, but you do have the ability as well to override production rate values at the assembly item level so that you can basically have one line item inside of your database for a concrete crew and then different levels of production based off of what that concrete crew is placing. All right, that's at a high level the stuff I want to show. There are a ton of other things like being able to have consistent across the board fee structures and markup structures inside of your rate tables. Every single table view will now remember its state. So if you are moving data from another system into our system and you move that on a regular basis, you don't have to constantly reconfigure your table views to make that work. It'll all be remembered for you, which should really streamline your data flow coming from applications outside of our products into our products, and vice versa, out of our products back into any other products that you want to move them to. All right, so I'm going to jump out of Estimator, and now I want to, or out of Data Manager, and I want to jump into Estimator. So I'm going to open up a sample estimate here. And one of the first things I'd like to do is consume that assembly we just created, since that's a little bit fresh in our mind. So what I want to do is say, add an assembly. And then, let's see, we got to, hope you know what I didn't do, since I was already connected, and I'm in a development environment. I do need to refresh my connection. All right, there we go. So we've got our simple slab on grade. So this is what this looks like now when you interact with choices. So you've got your questions. Oops, I forgot to actually put the question there. And instead of typing in a value, now I can pick from a value, and I can only pick from a value. The logic tree here is once I pick yes, it now asks me what's the dose of the water. So if I pick extended, it adds my extended item. If I pick standard, it adds my standard line item. We hit add and go. So I've just now added that to my estimate. I didn't have any values, but you can see here it's going on my list of assemblies, and then I'm going to close out. So that's one of the major pieces that we've added, is this idea of being able to simplify how you view the logic, how you interact with logic, how it's displayed and worked with inside of Estimator. All right, the next thing I wanted to show you guys was a little bit of a core estimating piece of functionality. And so what I wanted to show was around how you can interact with cost items that are derived from resource groups. So I've done a lot of work trying to support companies that do use resource groups, that are self-performed contractors, or they just have really tight control and detail on their estimates. One of the things that we've added here is the ability to, if you've got a line item here, it says concrete, that is actually priced, the labor is priced from a resource group, I can now modify directly either the total resource duration, so in this case, it's the number of hours each person on that crew. So if you total up all the guys in the crew, how many hours they're going to work, I can modify this. So instead of 254, if I want this to be 300, I can do that, and it will back into the productivity for that item. Or conversely, I can say, hey, the total number of hours that crew is going to work is 60. Let's say it's 55, right? And it'll again back into those values. So the idea here is that inside of our estimate view, you can change whatever value you need to change depending on how you think about and operate your business, or how you want to adjust your estimates. If it's from some contractor information you're getting, or from the guys running your crews. Another thing that I wanted to highlight while I'm here is you've got a lot of columns here. And sometimes it's hard to keep track of exactly what you're looking at. So one of the things that we've added is the ability to freeze columns. So now these columns are frozen, and I can pan over and still see in context what this price is actually related to. The ability to freeze those columns is actually tied to the layout. So if I haven't saved this layout, but if I shift over here to Uniform at level 1, I did save it here. Now if I go back to labor, you'll notice it's gone because I didn't save it with the layout. But if I wanted to, I can freeze those columns. I can come here and say, hey, I just want to edit my labor, go ahead and save it. Now that's saved with that layout. So if I bounce back and forth, you can see it's now saved with the layout. And you can put it anywhere you want, as well as obviously any of the columns, how they're sorted, where they're located, how wide they are, etc. All right, one of the other great things that we've done is the ability to modify your total aggregate cost. Now, you've always had the ability to set, at least for the last major versions, you've had the ability to set total aggregate cost. But if you did that in the past, what that would do is, for line items where you've got costs in various different buckets, I've got a labor cost, sub cost, equipment cost. If I were to edit this, it'd throw everything in other. Now, instead of throwing it all in other, if I edit this from a 1.38 to a $1.4 million line item, it will back in proportionally to each of the cost categories based on the quantity for that line item. So you now have the ability to back into cost by setting the total aggregate cost. Now, if one of these was tied to a resource group, it would edit the production rate instead of just giving it a lump sum price so that you can still keep track of that relationship, and it would back into that production rate appropriately, just like we saw it do earlier. All right. Now I'm going to bounce to, let's go, actually stay here for a second. Let's go to a little high-level layout. One of the other pieces that we've offered is the ability to have an overline total for your quantities. Now, you've always been able to do the operation I just did where you can sum up all the values in a column and show that sum here. But what you haven't been able to do is control what that value was. And so right now, the values that are shown aren't really all that great. They're not that valuable for you. So what we've done is the ability to set this value, and we've provided 3 different ways to do that. One, you could hit this drop down, select a unit of measure, let's say square foot, and it'll go through and it'll find every line item with the unit of measure square foot, total those values only up, stick that total here. Then if I want to have a sum of my cost per unit, I will be able to see the total cost. So in this case, it adds every line item's total aggregate cost up and divides it by the value shown in my overline quantity total. And it does it just for this group. So in this case, I'm grouping right now on CSI level 1 because I just dragged and dropped that up there. And now every time I group on just CSI level 1 and you see O3 concrete, it's going to have this as its overline quantity total. Notice that the O2 site construction is still working the same way it always has right now. So that's one way you can do it. The other way you can do it is to select a line item within a group and say, hey, I want this line item, or you could have more than one, so you could have one to as many as you want. And I want to say this line item contributes to the quantity. So in this case, I just picked one, but it would basically add up all the line items I selected. So if I selected a bunch of them, picked this guy, and I said, hey, I want this to contribute to quantity, that's the way it would work. And so now those line items are the ones that are actually driving this. And if those change, so if this 25,000 changes to say 30,000, it's updating accordingly. And if anything that's tied to this, so if you've got this associated with your 2D or 3D quantity takeoff, and those quantities change, your overline totals will change automatically because of the line that's tied to that. So this should save a lot of time when it comes to updating your estimate, as well as avoiding any kind of bust that may happen when somebody forgets to go back in. They update the quantities, but they forgot to update the overline quantities. Also, of course, you've got the unit of measure that's displayed here. This happened to stay in square feet because the items that I selected here, the first one was in square feet, and then, of course, this guy, it was in square feet. So it shows you the unit of measure, and then in the cost per unit, of course, that unit of measure is also displayed. The third way that you can set this is a good segue to a brand new view that we've got inside of Estimator. We call it our project information view. And this speaks to, among other things, a step toward our goal for being able to provide better conceptual estimating inside of Estimator. So if you're familiar with our product, you know that we've got a view called our dashboard view, and that view live links the estimate to an Excel environment directly inside of the application. So anything that you change in the estimate goes to the dashboard. The project information view is the exact same thing, except for it's on the front end. So now we have the ability to live link an Excel spreadsheet that's embedded in the application with information inside of our estimate. So this can drive the cost of the estimate. And one way that we can interact with it, along with just editing with driving quantities, is we can tie it directly to those overline quantities. So here, let's say I have a building area of 150,000 square feet. I can now come back to my estimate view and say that I really want this concrete to be driven off of that total building area value. So you can effectively, especially if you got multiple monitors, have that up, you can effectively hard code or hard key your total overline quantity to whatever value you want. If you want that to be a static value, you can. Or if you want to make it a little bit more advanced, you can actually drive this value from the values inside of this Excel spreadsheet, which is, again, embedded in the application now. So this could have as many tabs as you want. Right now I've only got one tab. We call it area study, so it's just a high-level area study of the project. But I could, if I wanted to, drive my total building area based off of the total building area inside of this calculated by the spreadsheet. So here I've got a couple of 4-foot plates. So you can see the areas here. And then I've got a total area for this value. So let's say I want to link these two together. All I have to do is say, hey, I want to link that property. And it's saying, basically asking, hey, you want to link this property to the value I've got selected? I say yes. So now you can see it's been updated to 745,000 because that's the value here. And if this value changes, right, so if this value, which is the sum of everything in this column, if that changes to something else, so let's say we have a massive footplate here, that updates here as well, and then back in the estimate, also now updated. So now that's all linked together, and it allows me to do some pretty cool conceptual estimating based right off of my existing area study spreadsheets, except it's all tied inside of my estimating platform, so I can see where the logic came from, I can follow it, and I can QA and QC everything to make sure it's working the way I expect it to. You can also come through here and highlight additional things. So for example, if I wanted to have pricing based off of the level 5 area, I could say I just want to tag that cell. This guy is level 5 area. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a new property for me, level 5 area, tied to this cell here. And I can now, inside of my estimate, among other places, reference it here. So now I can have pricing for concrete based off a level 5 area. That doesn't make much sense, but it would make sense if I broke my estimate down first by, let's say, level, then by CSI. In that case, I would give it an overline quantity tied to that. Now that wouldn't erase this because this is just my CSI level 1 at a high level grouping, but anytime I had the first broken down by floor, then broken down by CSI level 1 for O3 concrete, you would have seen that breakdown. So it'll remember that inside of the estimate anywhere you look at it. All right, there's a whole bunch more here. I don't want to get too deep in any of that stuff. We're getting close to time. I do want to jump over and talk about our 2D quantity takeoff enhancements, though. So what we can do here, I'm going to open up a little takeoff, and then I'm going to organize. Where did I get that organized? So here I've got my palette now organized by division, a high-level division, and then minor division. One of the major things that's new that you can't necessarily see here, but it is really important, is the fact that this palette is saved with the estimate. So you still have the ability to use templates to have a standard palette if you want to have a standardized list of conditions or takeoff options here. But any changes you make here, if they're specific to the estimate, are saved with this estimate, which means in 5 years from now, if I come back to this estimate and I open it up, all the changes are still going to be here. It's going to be just like it was 5 years ago when we last saved it. There's a bunch of smaller things. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they are really nice. So for those of you who have been using our tool, there's a couple of headache kind of related issues where if I go to select an area and I move my cursor over, this guy would have started auto panning left and right because it was in the middle of sketch mode. There's things like that we've done that should make your life significantly easier and nicer. For example, it doesn't do that anymore, and it won't do that until I start sketching, and then it will auto pan. While I'm sketching, one of the things that we provided as well is if you hold the Shift key, it will maintain that vector, so it'll keep sketching on that line, which will make it a lot easier when you know you've got that line to come through and then pick your endpoint. All right, another thing that we've done is the ability, if you've got things like any kind of rectangular shape, to click and drag and define rectangles or squares easily. This goes for areas as well as lines. So if I want to get a quick perimeter, I can do that. There are a couple of niceties. For example, there's no hot spots popping up every time I'm sketching. It's not pulling you away. And if I wanted to come in and delete something, all I have to do is select it, hit the delete key, hit yeah, I'm cool with deleting it, and it goes away. So we've also implemented a couple of shortcut keys for you. All right, there are some other niceties around maintaining your takeoff summary. So if you group this by anything and you go through and start changing your filters, it's not going to flatten this all back out and throw the layout away or the columns away. It did that in previous versions. It won't do that anymore. For some of you advanced users who have used this before, especially for 2D and 3D, when you've been doing both of them, we have worked together, and you probably know who you are. When you selected multiple different types of components and you want those all to drive a quantity inside of your takeoff when you're linking it to your cost items, that would create a group. We now have the ability to handle groups effectively so that when you organize your filter tree here based off of any information you like, including the component name, but if you base it based off a floor level, those groups will show up broken out so that you can now appropriately handle the groups and know exactly what your takeoff's been tied to inside of the 2D and 3D. That may not make a lot of sense for some of you who haven't gone into here, but it is a very big feature, and it was crucial to being able to do proper 2D and 3D quantity takeoff. And if you did want to see that, I can show you guys that at another time. All right, let's see. I think the last thing I want to show, because we only have 1 minute left, is kind of a big one. And that is, if I've got a handful of items, let's say, inside of my concrete, and I want to use those in another estimate, I can select them, either right-click and hit Copy Line Item, or just hit Control-C. I can go to another estimate. I can click inside the estimate view, and I can hit Paste or Control-V. It'll pop up saying, hey, do you want to reclassify these before I put them in? In this case, I don't care. I like the way they're classified now, so I'm good. And then, bam, you can copy and paste between estimates. So now moving costs from one estimate to another is as simple as Control-C, Control-V. All right, I think that put us right up on time. I am willing to stick around and answer any questions that you guys have. Again, I will also send out all of the enhancements, and there are a bunch after this, so that everybody on the webinar can see a complete list. And if you have any questions or anything that you didn't see, or even if it's on stuff that you did see, we'll definitely spend time with you, making sure you understand it, walking you through it. We are still in beta, which means if there is anything that either doesn't work the way you like, or if you want to make small tweaks, we can still fix and dress them. So I want to make sure you guys know that that's out there, and if you want to get this on your machine today, you can.
Okay, awesome, Mike. That was actually one of our clients' questions, if sample estimates are available for beta testing.
You're welcome to have the one I'm using here. Absolutely, we can give you sample estimates to play around with and kick the tires. I can even give you the layouts that I've got here as well, so you can have a familiar looking interface when you're playing with it.
Okay, but we have some questions around takeoff. So can you pull the takeoff palette and component off to another screen?
So you cannot. We will be implementing that. So I understand definitely that it is a pain. It does take up a lot of real estate, and you have to unpin it if you wanted to be able to see your old drawing. That is coming, I promise.
Okay, and then in the takeoff grouping enhancements, do all properties carry into the takeoff menu, or is it still only the properties that all takeoff items share?
So if I believe I understand your question, the list of properties is going to be the properties that are inside of your takeoff items, so in this case, your conditions. It's not going to be your WBS properties. There will be a merger of these two. So actually, it'll probably come in the exact same version where we can tear off the takeoff summary, but the palette. But the basic idea is yes, we do want to merge those two together. Right now, it is just the list of properties that you create and tie to your existing conditions.
Okay, and then we have one talking about allowing for collaboration, multiple estimators in same or different office.
Good question. So that is actually in our immediate next release. That's our 2019 1.0 release. That functionality is demoable. We do expect it to go to alpha at the end of this year. If you're interested in testing that or seeing that, we can actually show you a demo, a live demo of how that looks and feels and works. So if you want to work with our teams to set that up, we'd be happy to. And then if you're an existing client, if you're somebody who really wants to kick the tires on this thing, we'd be happy to set up an environment for you to actually play with it and make sure it works correctly. We definitely would appreciate any feedback you have.
I do want to let you know that whenever we close out this webinar, we'll follow up with any questions we didn't get to during this presentation. But I want to thank Mike and thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to following up with y'all all on this next version.
Hey, Holly, one thing, too, that I wanted to note, I want to thank everybody who helped make this version possible. 100% of the features that were in this version were directly from our clients. And I just wanted to thank each and every one of you. I know a lot of you guys on the phone for taking the time to test the software, to give us feedback, to work with us as we developed it, and make sure that it actually worked correctly and it did what you needed it to do. Thank you so much for your time, and please continue to provide this for us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
guys.